All right, for Geeks Live interview, I'm Martin, and today I have the pleasure of talking to the CEO of Stratton Studios, Josh Loveridge, and he's going to tell us all about his new game and just about anything else I ask him because he has to. Okay, so it's good to see you, Josh.
It's great. It's great to talk to you, Martin.
All right. Okay, so right. Let's go ahead and start from the beginning.
Right.
How did you get started? How did you decide that game design was something you wanted to do? And I usually find in these kind of things, especially at a young age, it really helps to have somebody who will support you. And I wanted to be an artist when I was a kid, and my mother was all for it. My father thought you're never going to make any money doing that, and apparently he was right because that's not what I do. But just tell us about how you got started.
So I have probably the most unconventional dev story there is. So I originally started out as essentially a kind of, I suppose in the States you'd know it as like a high school dropout essentially. I dropped out of mainstream education at a quite young age, and I essentially decided, right, if there's a book there, I can learn it. And I essentially self-educated myself to finish my education. And from there, I was like, when I did that, I essentially said, okay, what do I want to do now? I do not have a clue. So I was like, well, what do I like doing? I like playing games. So I'll give it a go at making them. And then, and then from there, I started to get into kind of the whole dev scene. And I quickly realized very quickly, okay, this is very difficult to make money, extremely difficult. There's not much money in it. So then I was like, okay, well, what do you do when something's hard to make money? And then I was like, well, you use your skills that you have to work in a different industry. So then kind of that's when everything started really, and Loveridge Design started. So Stratton Studios, what the gaming side of things used to be called Loveridge Designs. And Loveridge Designs essentially was an amalgamation of everything I could do. So, at one stage we were doing game dev, we were doing film production, we were doing we were doing a little bit of everything. At the very beginning, it was like just, my way of being able to develop games while retaining positive cash flow. Because that's the biggest thing about running the game studio. You have to have positive cash flow every month. Otherwise, you're going to fail so quickly. So I started that, and essentially what happened then was so I was doing that for a few years. It started to grow. And from when it started to grow, I was just kind of going along, making a lot of mistakes within the dev scene, as you've probably seen from our first titles. If you've played our titles along the way, you can see a big evolution. And everyone says that. And it was kind of our path of learning. So as we kind of grew, and as the game side of things grew, and Loveridge Designs grew as a company, it started to become very apparent that this isn't going to work. And what I mean by it isn't going to work is that the companies couldn't be the same anymore. So essentially, the company split. So Loveridge Designs, which is now Loveridge Digital, split into a full-service media agency. And that's still gone. That's a global company now. So we've got multiple employees across the world in that. And we're kind of working on franchises like Star Wars and stuff like that, doing post-production and so that's very successful, and that kind of worked out. And then the game side of things splintered off into Stratton Studios. And from there, it's just kind of been from strength to strength ever since, just kind of learning from our mistakes and, taking every piece of knowledge we can and keep growing on it and trying to, make games that people love. And that's really the biggest thing that I kind of have been trying to push over the last few years, because I believe there's massive fatigue within the gaming industry, extreme fatigue with regards to players. Players feel like they are essentially worthless. And what I mean by that is that the players feel like developers don't care about them. That's essentially the consensus it is. Like, for example, if you look at a YouTube video of someone does, I respond to every comment. Ever anyone talks about anything I do, I respond to it. I will spend 20 hours straight doing it if I have to, and I will write a reply to everyone. And the number one response I get every time is, I didn't think a developer would respond to me. I didn't think you cared. And then it was just like, so that's the biggest thing I'm trying to change, and that's what we're doing at the moment. Trying to make every player know that, you know, we actually do care about what you think. And if you want to hop on a call with me, I'll spend 10 hours on a call with you if you want to hash out any issues you have, and I'll do that, because that's, you know, that's the biggest thing. And I think that's what's driving innovation and change, because I'm not sure if you're aware about kind of the Irish gaming scene as a whole, but it's not that big. Like, there's, I can count on one hand the number of kind of actual serious studios, and most of them are exteriorly funded. Like, you know, Stratton Studios as a whole is not exterior funded by anyone. You know, it's all off the back of what I've built over the years. And, you know, Loveridge Digital is able to, you know, because that's extremely successful, it's able to help with that. And, you know, it's all self-funded, and we're kind of built a publishing house and a game development studio from the ground up, which is quite rare, whereas most studios here in Ireland are all venture capitalist funded. You know, they have like a very deep pocket. So it's interesting to kind of be able to be in that space and to try and drive innovation. Because I'm a big thing that about, you know, the gaming industry is one of the greatest industries in the world to work in. It's, you know, there's so much highs and lows in it, and it's exhilarating when you get it right.
Well, see, you know, and it's funny that you talked about that, because, you know, when they first told me, you know, that you were interested in talking to us, I was thinking it's very rare for a CEO of a company to be the mouthpiece of the company. Usually they'll have other people who will do that, and that was as you said, that was one of the things I thought, wow, that's really cool. I said, because normally, especially, and the bigger you get, the less likely you're going to hear anything from the CEO. There's 1,000 people under him who's going to be doing that. So I agree with you. So especially, you know, as far as, you know, interacting with the fans, I mean, and they appreciate it. I mean, and obviously you realize that because you're taking the time to do it. But now, as you continue to grow, especially, you know, on the gaming side, do you still see that as a direction you will take, or will you eventually get to the point where you will not be able to have that kind of connection with your basically your gamers?
And it's the core philosophy of the studio, and our motto is remember your roots, love what you do. And, you know, if I ever come to a stage where I am no longer doing the stuff I need to do to please, you know, to give the fans the recognition they deserve, well, then I've failed as a game developer. And I'll say that openly. If I ever stop doing press junkets and talking to people, well, then I failed. Then I'm a changed man, because it's not in me to not do it. Like, I've set out a clear goal that I'm going to do that, and that's all I need to do, is to just make sure that everyone knows that I do listen to them. Because, you know, when you do that, it's amazing. It's like a fire you ignite in people, you know. Like, even the biggest trolls on the internet, you can turn them into the biggest fans. Like, I remember there's one guy in particular, he commented, like, you know, on one of our last games, he commented on the trailer. He was like, "Oh, I didn't know PlayStation 4 was backwards compatible with PS1." He was talking about the graphics in the game, and I just commented, and I always say, kill the trolls with kindness. And every time I respond to someone, I'm really nice, really, like, you know, I tell them that I care, and I'm like, listen, let's hop on a call and let's hash this out. What do you want me to change in the game, and I'll change it. And the first response was, "I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize that you were going to see this, you were going to respond." And that's the thing I want to invoke. I want positivity is the biggest thing within Stratton Studios. And you're probably, if you looked at the Twitter profile, you'll see it. We're all about positivity. Like, literally every day we've a quota. At least 40 messages have to go out every day to growing developers, just to say, you're doing good work. You're doing a good job. You're on the right track. And you'd be amazed at the response you get out of that, and the community that you build. And we've built, over the last 12 months, we've built a great, you know, indie developer community around us. But now we want to start reaching out to the actual gaming community, people that are playing our games. We want them to be part of the community because, you know, the positivity in it's great. And, you know, the amount of ideas and the things that can be sparked out of that is truly amazing. So that's kind of my opinion on that side of things.
And basically you and I share a brain on this because, you know, I haven't really been like in the Twitter thing all that long, really. I'm a kind of a late starter to it, but I've often found that, right, even the nastiest people, if you address them, you know, in a positive fashion. I mean, I've had that situation, you know, where they were kind of nasty, and I just, you know, basically kind of talked them down where basically they end up apologizing and say, okay, I didn't mean to offend you. So you didn't offend me. So everyone has an opinion. So, and if I can't listen to it, then that's probably on me more than on you. So it's a great attitude. Like I said, now I noticed that in your devcast that, you know, you have been reaching out to, you know, like to Amazon and different companies. And you also talked, I think, in one of your devcasts about maybe reaching out to other game developers, maybe to teaming up as such. Is that something you're still looking to do?
Yes and no. It's very difficult for us to partner with other studios, especially right now. We're finding big issues. The game development community is quite closed off at a certain level. So the indie development, very startup side of things, is very open. You know, everyone wants to help each other. Everyone's very positive. When you start to get into the professional side of things, it becomes very closed door, very shut off. Everyone's like, all right, I'll help you, but what do I get out of it?
Right.
You know, it's very, you know, there's a lot of kind of closed door stuff that happens, and it's quite closed off. We're always open to speaking with people, and I speak with people on, you know, I have a couple of calls a week with other developers just to see how they're getting on and see if I can help them in any way. And it is something that we probably will do in the future. Right now, Stratton Studios as a publisher is like, you know, this will be our third professional kind of title that's been on the console market. So we're starting to kind of build that thing ourselves. So I'd imagine in the future we will partner with someone, and, you know, potentially we will look to secure IPs in the future to possibly do a collaboration title. That is something I'm very open to. And, you know, it's something that I've talked to people in the past about, and I'm going to continue to talk to people about. But I'll never sell out to, you know, just make a nice return on it. That's a big thing. It has to be right. It has to, you know, work well, and it has to resonate with what we're making. Like Stratton Studios as a whole makes a very specific niche set of games. We don't kind of do, you know, just random games. It's always Halloween themed. That's our thing. And that's the thing we're going to continue to push, because, you know, I think you have to pick a niche and master it. That's very important.
Yes, actually, you answered one of my questions there, so that's good. So your first game, the one we found, which was on Xbox, so what went into the development of that one?
The one we found was a game I made when I was finishing my education. So I was, when I was while I was doing my master's, kind of that kind of time period. It was the first logical leap into the professional games market for me from a commercially viable perspective, because a horror game is very easy to do on a cheap budget. I had a good story, and I was like, right, okay, I can do this, get it out into the market, and to see what happens. And back then, I was some, like, you know, young whippersnapper. I didn't have a clue about anything, to be honest with you. I thought, you know, put this out, and it was going to, that's it. Like, you know, I made it, put it out there, and it was just, you know, I was the next day, you know, the bank account is filled up. I learned very quickly that doesn't happen. You know, it's a very harsh market, and the development of the one we found was probably the worst development cycle of a game I've ever made. Like, you know, they say, like, you know, the old duct tape solution, that was duct tape on duct tape. Like, there were so many issues, so many bugs, and I think that came out in a lot of the players' experience. There was a lot of flaws to it. It was a flawed development cycle with a flawed end product. and that's the result. Like, we patched it, we ended up patching it and getting it to a pretty okay state. It's still like, you know, I'm I'm partially ashamed of that game. Anytime I'm at a conference and anyone says, and they made the one we found, I kind of just like duck my head. I'm like, oh no, don't talk about that. So it's but we learned a lot. We learned a crazy amount. You know, the one we found had a great story. It really did. It was and I think people like that. We actually won a couple of awards for the story on the one we found, and the narrative. So you know, it was a decent story. I think it was the wrong time to do that game, but your first title, I don't think any title's right for it. I think, you know, it's going to be flawed in some way. But it enabled us to build our connections, you know, solidify ourselves. Okay, these guys are somewhat serious. Let's see, you know, what they do next. And then, you know, kind of enabled us to jump onto Sony, which was obviously a big jump, you know, going from Microsoft to Sony. It was it was not the most logical decision, but it's one that we're happy that we made, you know.
Yeah, so then the one we found then was your only one for Xbox. So now I know you're also doing Nintendo Switch, I think. Is that correct? What's the other gaming system you're working with?
So we're partnered with all of them. We're registered. Yeah, we're partnered with all the platforms. We have access to all of them. So it's really what we pick and choose. And the main reason we stick with Sony is because Sony treats us very well. That's just really, you know, so we have a great relationship with Sony, and the way we kind of push things. So multi-platform launches are great, right? They're a great idea, great conceptually, but you're taking big risks. If your game is not 100% solid and you release on multiple platforms, it's going to be a worse game, because doing the ports takes so much time. You know, so the way my methodology now is, with every game, release on only one platform. If it does well, players like it, then port. Then worry about getting it out on other things. But focus on the one title and make sure that is the best possible experience for the player. Otherwise, you know, you're going to start running into major issues very quickly.
Okay, so then we get to Castle Costume, which was your second one, I looked at the gameplay of this one, and I showed it to my 10-year-old grandson, and he thought it was cool. Of course, my grandson is very much into the Halloween style games. You know, he'll do the Plants vs. Zombie thing, and he thought it looked great. So in making that one, what did you learn from doing Castle Costume?
Castle Costume was a bit of a. It was a strange. It started out as something completely different. So, you know, after the one we found, I hit this wall. You know, I hit this wall in development where I was like, okay, what do I do next? Do I make another horror game, or, you know, what do I do? And at this time, I was kind of looking at a lot of the games I'd like to play. You know, I was like, okay, because I don't really get time to play games anymore. When you're making them, you have to kind of, you know, leave that luxury. But I was kind of looking at what I felt there was a gap in the market for, and I was like, well, collectathons, there hasn't been one of them in a good while. And, you know, they've a solid fan base. Do I think I can do it well? Yes. I was like, okay, I think I can nail this one. You know, I had a good story. There was a funny thing, the Angry Aaron with the stolen sock, that was actually based on a real story. So it was like, okay, this is going to fit. And then it didn't start out as anything similar to Castle Costume. Actually, Castle Costume started out as Costume Kingdom. So Costume Kingdom is the original kind of concept of Castle Costume. But what we realized was that as soon as I started the first version of the game, I was like, we can't get this done in a year. You know, it's not doable. So I was like, right, okay, we're going to make a different game. So that's where Castle Costume came into it. I was like, okay, I love collectathon 3D platformers. I can do it very well. I need something light humored after the one we found, because that was a very deep kind of dark development cycle. I was like, I need something light, I need something funny, so let's roll with it. And it was just kind of, you know, the core philosophy of the title was no bugs, no bugs. I don't care what everyone says, but I do not want them to say it was buggy. That's the one thing I don't want people to say. And we nailed that. Like, there was very few bugs in that title that, you know, people reported. But we went too far on that one. I focused too much on making sure the title was fully clean rather than focusing on gameplay mechanics. So some people found it a little repetitive. But for what it was, the price point and who it was targeted for, it was targeted for kids, you know, 7 plus, just as a Halloween title type of thing. And it hit all them marks. And, you know, we still have some players from that really enjoyed it and thought it was quite funny. And it was a couple hours experience. That was, you know, one thing that you get done in an evening. And it was quite, like, you know, it was fun to play on Halloween type of thing. So it was a really good development cycle. It was a major step up for the studio. You know, we kind of leveled up a good bit on that. We went up a few levels, and we learned a lot of things about the PlayStation platform and how that development cycle is going to work and how we're going to do that. So it was great, and, you know, we learned a lot. And then coming into Costume Kingdom, you know, we were well equipped to really tackle this beast.
So, I mean, you know, you got feedback from Castle Costume. So how much of the feedback that you get from Castle Costume were you able to tie into Costume Kingdom?
So I have a weird way of handling feedback. I put it into a spreadsheet. I class it as actionable feedback or just troll nonsense. Because, you know, you just get some people who are just like, bad game. They don't tell you why. They don't tell you what they didn't like. I've even tried email on some of these people, and most of them don't respond. And then there's some very insightful people that give you really good feedback. Like, for example, some people said the music was too loud for me. So now I was like, all right, we've got an issue here. The players want to be able to adjust the music. Let's add a music slider to the next game. Some people were like, I didn't like the camera angle. Okay, let's make it customizable. Give them a couple options for that. So literally every single issue people had with Castle Costume is fixed in Costume Kingdom. Every single one. I went through, there was over 100 hours of content of reviews, people, and I went through every single pain point people had, and I fixed them. And we actually patched most of them into Castle Costume anyway, and I made sure anytime I fix a bug, someone tells me, I make sure to email them and tell them, yeah, that's fixed now. So just to make sure you're aware. But yeah, so every single one's fixed. I make sure to, you know, because that's free QA.
Right.
So, you know, that costs a lot of money to get done. So, you know, I'll take it any day of the week.
So, okay, so we talked about the next gen consoles getting started. Now, will, you know, like Costume Kingdom, will it be ported into the new thing, or will you develop a new game specifically for the PlayStation 5?
I cannot confirm or deny anything about our new our titles related to the next generation of hardware. That's all I can say on that one. Sony have us fairly tight-lipped, so I can't really comment on that, but I can't confirm or deny it.
So can you tell me, is it harder?
Theoretically, if we were to be talking about the next generation hardware and the specs that are out in the public, what I can say is that if we were to make a game, you know, say we were on level here for Costume Kingdom where it is now, we're aiming for here for the next title. And, you know, from what we're doing at the moment and the R&D that we are kind of conducting, all I can say is that the next title we publish out, whatever platform that comes out on, is going to be the best game we have ever made. And that's not to say that Costume Kingdom isn't a really, really good game. It is. It's definitely, we pushed the current hardware that's available to the limit. We really did. Like 4 months ago, the game didn't even launch on the PlayStation platform. You know, it just was too big, because it's an open world game. So it's kind of, you know, very little, no loading screens once you get in. So it was kind of, it was very technically challenging to make that run very well and to run smoothly. So we pretty much, you know, pushed the hardware really to the limit and what's capable. And obviously with coronavirus, you know, it was only me working on the game. So, you know, it was very, very grassroots, very, you know, it was a very raw development cycle. You know, it was essentially me and my madness, you know, doing things that we probably, because this is how Costume Kingdom started, really. Like, we had a set. So in game design, you generally have a GDD or a game design document that usually details everything that you're going to make within the title, and it ensures that timelines get met, and, you know, it's something that you're meant to stick to. But what happened with this game was we had a set GDD, and we finished early. We were just like, all right, we got everything done. We're like, do we sit on it, or do we add in these bunch of wish list features that, you know, we just kind of made up out of the air? And it turned out that the game kind of doubled in size in the last 2 months of development. It was crazy, like the amount of features we were implementing. Like, for example, in the game, there's this feature called the Hollow Zoo, where it's kind of like your own zoo, where you can kind of visit all these different creatures in the game and collect them. And, you know, it was really innovative features that we never thought we'd be able to achieve. So it was definitely, you know, fishing mechanics. That's another thing that got implemented at the last minute, but it worked out amazingly. And it's actually one of the funner parts of the game, you know, being able to go to different locations and fish, and kind of, you know, it's kind of like a QTE based thing. So there's lots of, like, jam packed with features. It really is. So it's quite nice to have that sitting there.
So at this point, as far as beta testing goes, do you just test it in house, or do you have other people test it? How do you approach beta testing?
Beta testing for us is very strange. So we tested in house, quite, like, rigorously. You know, I think on Costume Kingdom there's over, I think, 1,600 beta builds. So there was quite a lot of, and each one took 3 hours to run through. So you know, it was a little bit of a that was definitely tough on the QA team. But what I do then is I actually roll it out to non-gamers, because I find that non-gamers find issues much quicker than gamers themselves. So I'll roll it out to non-gamers, like just people that, like, you know, work in office space, like, you know, just regular, you know, workers essentially. And I just roll it out to them, and then they kind of give me their feedback on what they like and what they don't like. And the reason I say that is, now this is kind of counterintuitive, but the game is targeted towards children. If you think who is going to be actually buying the game for a child, probably their parents. You know, that wouldn't be too much of a logical jump to make that, you know, kind of assumption. So we made sure that the games appeal to them. We made sure the game appeals to children themselves. So we give them to people, and we'd let their kids play them as well. So we have quite a decent beta testing kind of area going. Now that gets very difficult on the once you actually port to the console platforms, because you can't just, like, roll out dev kits to people. So it's you know, it gets tricky on that side of the thing. So you have to really, generally we get our core gameplay loops down and kind of decided before we'll make the leap onto the console platform and start the porting process.
Okay, so at this point, as far as the release date goes for the game, do you have an idea at this point?
We have a set release date. We do. We haven't officially announced it yet, but what I can say is
Come on, Josh, stop.
Let's just say, right, the last few titles, everyone has complained about the day we released. We released on Halloween Day. So this year we've gone what everyone has asked, and that was the start of October. So I'll give you that window. So between the 1st and the 7th of October, that's when it's coming out. So
good enough. Okay. Well, you're talking about the COVID thing. So is that how badly or how have you managed with that? Because of course, kind of, as you said, it's kind of making you work by yourself. But has that been a major detriment to you, especially in this last game?
Not really. And we're lucky in that facet. So I'm a big advocate within the gaming community, and I do a lot of conferences related to this, but I'm a big kind of proponent on not forgetting the business side about game development. Like, you have to know good business structure, you have to have streamlined systems, decent processes, good cash flow. And if you have everything and all them, like, your ducks in order, you didn't really feel it. Like, and we were one of the only companies around that didn't feel it and didn't, start letting go of people and, didn't do any of that. So we were mostly fine. It just made development, a little quicker. We had to, kind of ramp things up a lot more because there was pressures being put on us from, obviously with the next generation hardware as well coming out. There's a lot of changes that are happening. So it's, everything that needs to be going out this year really had to be done a couple of months back. So it's it was a lot more pressure, but we got it done and we got it sorted. So we were one of the only companies that didn't really feel it, and that was just because we had good business processes in place, really good cash flow, and really good systems behind it. So no one was, we weren't. It didn't the lockdown didn't get announced and then we were like, oh, what are we going to do? We had a procedure in place already ready to go. So we were prepared. I always say you're better off preparing and not needing it than, not preparing it and then being up the creek without a paddle.
Yep, good. I said we could have used that kind of thinking here. So anyway, it said it's been good to talk to you. So last thing you said, if you want to tell your fans about what do you want to tell your fans about the new game coming out? The floor is yours.
Yeah, so I'll just run through essentially the little elevator pitch of it. So essentially, Costume Kingdom is a Halloween-themed turn-based action-adventure game set in a semi-open world environment and played from a third-person perspective. Now, the player takes on the role of Ryan, who's a young child on a quest to beat the Apex Cup while unknowingly saving Halloween. Now, the Apex Cup is a competition that is held on Halloween night, and essentially it's where the children of this town called Manchester use their Halloween in a tournament to see who is the champion. And there's a lot of kind of rewards that come with being that champion. During the game, you're going to build your team of Halloween and trick-or-treat your way through the breathtaking Manchester. During this, you will be collecting costumes and completing quests, which will help you unlock mystical abilities that will aid you in defeating Pineapple and saving Halloween. It's a Halloween experience that will warm the hearts of adults and children alike. So that's our little pitch for it. But from our alpha testing, if anyone's played the Costume Quest series, we've been compared to that a lot. So if you're into that type of game and you've played that game a couple of years back, geez, it's been nearly 10 years since that came out. But it's in a similar vein. It's a monster taming game where essentially you are collecting these magical creatures who are not only your companion, but they're giving you different abilities, and then you get these little costumes of them, which also give the player abilities. So, like, for example, there's a character called Crocos, who's like a crocodile type Holomon, who gives you the ability to swim. And there's like, where you jump on his back and you're kind of swimming around. Or then there's like this one called Magmos, who's like a fire kind of rhino character who'll give you the ability to breathe fire. And then you might be melting ice to unlock a new area. So there's loads of different mechanics that you unlock, and there's kind of 3 stages to this Apex Cup, this competition. Each one has their own kind of environment that you go into, and these kind of funny characters that you meet. There's a lot of kind of pop culture references in there. So if you like if you're up on your pop culture, you'll get a good laugh out of the game. It's a fun little title. From a price point perspective, it's going to be launched around $9.99, so it's not going to break the bank in any means. And it's definitely something to be playing on Halloween. And it's if you've liked any of our previous titles, if you've heard of them, even thought about it, I would just say give it a try. It's literally our best title that we've put out yet. And I can tell you this, it's so highly polished. It's really fun. And the one thing no one is going to say about this game is that it's a lackluster title. They're definitely either going to love it or they mightn't like it. But they can't knock us for not trying. And it's going to be good. I'm really looking forward to the release of this one. I really am. It's definitely going to be very interesting to see how players react to it, especially because the open quality.
And one thing that we know for a fact, if they do have any feedback, they can tell you about it. And
they can indeed.
Yep. So we look forward to that, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And we will, of course, be following as you go, and probably be getting back to you once we start hearing about maybe your next title for the next gen systems, because you got me intrigued about what's going on there. But
that's no problem.
Kept your lips tight about that. So we'll be happy to follow you along again. I hope to talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, Martin.
All right.